Picture this. The storm outside is a mirror of the one in your soul. For 10 years, the walls of the convent have been your shield, a fortress of prayer and penance. The vows you took were a sacred, unbreakable pledge, a promise whispered to God in the shadowed silence of the chapel. But tonight, a frantic, desperate knock at the great oak door threatens to shatter everything. On the other side, illuminated by a flash of lightning, is him, the man you sacrificed your entire world to protect, the ghost of a life you locked away. He is bleeding, half-conscious, and clinging to the doorframe as if it were the last tether to this earth. The Mother Superior's stern gaze is on you, a silent reminder of your duty, your sacred oath. But his eyes, even glazed with pain, find yours. In that moment, the years dissolve, the stone walls melt away, and there is only one question left burning in the ruins of your heart. Do you break your sacred pledge to save the man you never stopped loving? For Sister Agnes, the world had shrunk to the size of this cold, rain-lashed courtyard. 10 years ago, she had been Alara, a girl whose laughter was as free as the wildflowers in the meadow, a girl whose world turned on the axis of a young man named Silas. But that world had been scorched to ash. Now, seeing Silas slumped before her, the carefully constructed piece of her existence crumbled. The other sisters recoiled, whispering prayers, but Agnes moved as if in a trance. She knelt in the mud, her pristine white wimple brushing against his blood-soaked shirt. His face, once open and bright, was now a mask of hard-won survival, etched with lines of pain and a jagged scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. A mark she had never seen, a story she had never heard. His breath was a shallow rasp. Alara, he murmured, the name of forbidden prayer on his lips, a name no one had spoken in a decade. That single word was a key, unlocking a room in her heart she had sworn to keep sealed forever. Ignoring the Mother Superior's sharp intake of breath, Agnes and the old infirmarian, Sister Mary Catherine, half-dragged, half-carried him inside, laying him upon a narrow cot in the infirmary. The scent of rain, blood, and the wild outdoors filled the sterile space, a profane intrusion into their sanctuary. As she cleaned his wounds, her hands, usually steady in their pious tasks, trembled. Every touch was a memory. The broadness of his shoulders, the coarse texture of his hair, the surprising warmth of his skin beneath the cold, wet clothes. He had been attacked on the road, left for dead. He dragged himself for miles, driven by an instinct he couldn't name, drawn to the one place he thought he could find refuge, never knowing it was her prison. The Mother Superior stood in the doorway, her face a stone tablet of judgment. "Sister," she said, her voice devoid of warmth, "you know the rules. We do not shelter outsiders, especially not men of violence." Agnes did not look up from her work. "He is a man in need of God's mercy, Mother. Are we to deny him that?" Her voice was quiet but carried a steely undertone that surprised even herself. For 10 years she had been a model of obedience, meek, pious, and silent. But the sight of Silas, broken and vulnerable, had awakened the girl she once was, the girl who would have burned down the world for him. The truth was a poison she had swallowed daily. She had not chosen God over Silas. She had chosen this living death to save him from a man far more dangerous than any highway bandit. Mayor Thorne, a man whose greed was matched only by his cruelty. Thorne had wanted her, and when she had refused him for Silas, he had promised to utterly destroy the young man she loved, to grind him into the dust. Fleeing into the arms of the church had been her only move, a desperate gambit to place herself beyond Thorne's reach and, in doing so, remove the target from Silas's back. He never knew. He only knew that the woman he loved had vanished, leaving behind nothing but a whispered rumor that she had given her life to Christ. The ultimate betrayal. In the days that followed, the convent infirmary became a crucible for two fractured souls. Silas drifted in and out of consciousness, his fevered dreams filled with fractured images of the ambush, of dust and fists and the glint of a knife. In his brief moments of lucidity, he would watch Agnes as she moved about the room, a pale figure in a sea of gray habit. He saw the quiet efficiency of her hands, but he also saw the deep, abiding sorrow in her eyes, a sorrow that seemed too old for her years. The slow, deliberate rhythm of the convent, the tolling of the matins bell, the soft chanting of prayers, the scent of beeswax and old incense, was a stark contrast to the storm raging within them both. Their conversations were tentative, islands of words in an ocean of silence. He asked no questions about her life here, and she asked none about the scar on his face. It was a fragile truce, a shared understanding that the past was a minefield. Yet, the bond between them, buried but never severed, began to reassert itself. She would leave an extra piece of bread on his tray. He would save a sliver of his strength to offer a weak smile when she entered the room. It was a language spoken in gestures, in glances held a second too long. One afternoon, as a pale sun streamed through the high, arched window, he was awake and clear-eyed. "Alara," he said, his voice stronger now. The sound of her given name was still a jolt, a beautiful, painful thing. She stopped, her back to him. "My name is Sister Agnes now," she replied softly, her voice betraying nothing. He shifted, wincing as he pushed himself up on his elbows. "I don't believe that," he said, his gaze intense. "I see you. Under all this gray, I still see the girl who climbed the old oak tree faster than I could. The girl who wasn't afraid of anything. A tear she didn't know was there traced a path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. That girl is gone, Silas." He shook his head slowly. "No. She's just hiding." He didn't know how right he was. She was hiding from Thorn, from the past, from the love that felt like a sin. That evening, a traveling merchant stopped at the convent gates, bringing supplies and news from the town of Redemption, a town firmly in the grip of Mayor Thorn. He spoke of Thorn's expanding power, how he was buying up ranches and homesteads, his influence spreading like a fever. Agnes listened from the shadows of the cloister, a cold dread coiling in her stomach. She saw the way the Mother Superior's face tightened with concern. Thorn's reach was long, and his memory was longer. The sanctuary she had chosen was beginning to feel more and more like a beautifully crafted cage, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the walls were about to be tested. The test came sooner than she imagined. A week later, 2 riders appeared on the horizon, not the dusty figures of common travelers, but men who sat tall in their saddles, their clothes too fine for the frontier. They rode directly to the convent gates, and leading them was Mayor Thorn himself. He was older, his face fuller, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, and possessive. He dismounted with an air of absolute authority, as if the sacred ground of the convent was merely another one of his properties. He didn't demand entry. He announced his presence, expecting to be received. The Mother Superior met him in the courtyard, her posture rigid with a mixture of piety and fear. Agnes watched from the infirmary window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Silas, now able to sit in a chair by the window, saw the riders too. His hand instinctively went to the empty space on his belt where a gun would normally sit. "Thorn," he growled, the name a curse. The mayor smiled, a thin, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Mother Superior," he began, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I have it on good authority that you are harboring a fugitive, a man named Silas, wanted for a violent assault on one of my deputies." He produced a legal writ, a piece of paper that held more power than any prayer. The Mother Superior's face went pale. The law of man was knocking at the door of the house of God. Just then, Thorn's eyes scanned the cloister and landed on Agnes, who had stepped out from the infirmary, unable to remain hidden. His smile widened. "Well, well, Sister Agnes. Or should I say Alara?" He savored her name, letting it hang in the air like a threat. "Providence is a funny thing. It seems to have brought us all together again." The Mother Superior looked from Thorn's triumphant face to Agnes's terrified one, and her resolve crumbled. She was a woman of rules and order, and the writ in Thorn's hand was undeniable. "We cannot stand against the law," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Bring the man out." But as 2 of Thorn's men moved toward the infirmary, Agnes stepped directly in their path. Her small frame seemed to radiate a sudden, immense power. No, the word was not a plea. It was a command. All eyes turned to her. In that moment, the dam of her 10-year silence broke, and the truth came rushing out in a torrent of righteous fury. "You will not take him," she cried, her voice ringing across the courtyard. She turned her blazing eyes on Thorn. "This is your doing. All of it. I took these vows because of you. You told me you would destroy him, ruin his life, leave him with nothing if I didn't disappear. My vow was never to God. It was a ransom payment for his life, paid to a devil in a fine suit." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled sisters. Silas, hearing everything from the doorway, froze. The betrayal he had carried for a decade was not a betrayal at all. It was a sacrifice. The puzzle of his broken life snapped into place, revealing a picture of love so fierce it had chosen self-immolation over his destruction. He strode forward, weak but resolute, and stood beside her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Thorn's mask of civility finally cracked. "Seize them both," he snarled. But something had shifted. The other sisters, who had lived in fear of the Mother Superior's rules and the world's power, saw not a fallen woman, but a righteous one. Led by the elderly sister Mary Catherine, they moved, forming a silent, human wall between Agnes and Silas and Thorn's men. It was an act of quiet, unshakable rebellion. Thorn, exposed and outmaneuvered, stared at the wall of gray-robed women. He had lost. For now, with a final, venomous glare, he mounted his horse and rode away, his threats swallowed by the vast, indifferent sky. In the stunned silence that followed, Agnes turned to the Mother Superior. With deliberate, reverent hands, she reached up and unpinned her wimple, letting it fall to the ground. Her dark hair, hidden for a decade, tumbled around her shoulders. She was no longer Sister Agnes. She was Alara again. "I cannot serve God in a house built on a lie," she said, her voice clear and strong. "My pledge was broken the moment it was made in fear. My penance is over." They left the convent at dawn. The Mother Superior, her own faith shaken and perhaps deepened by the display of fierce, protective love, met them at the gate. She pressed a small, heavy pouch of coins into Alara's hand. "God's path is not always the one we pave with stone," she said, her voice thick with an emotion Alara had never heard from her before. "May you find your own sanctuary." As they walked away from the only home Alara had known for a decade, they were not alone. A small boy, an orphan named Leo whom Alara had taken under her wing, had refused to stay behind. With a small bundle of his own, he had slipped out to join them, his small hand finding Silas's larger one. They had nothing but the clothes on their backs, a handful of coins, and each other. They were outcasts, but they were free. Silas led them towards the high country, to a place he had never spoken of. After days of travel, they arrived at a small, rugged cabin nestled in a hidden valley, a sanctuary he had carved out of the wilderness with his own 2 hands. He had built it in the years after he thought he'd lost her, a monument to his solitude and his grief. The air was clean, the silence was broken only by the wind in the pines, and for the first time in 10 years, Alara felt she could breathe. This was not a place of penance, but a place of beginning. He had built this life for the memory of a girl he thought was gone forever. She had sacrificed her life for the boy she had never stopped loving. And now, standing on the porch of the small cabin, with the boy Leo happily whittling a piece of wood nearby, they watched the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. In the ruins of their old promises, they had found something truer, more sacred than any vow whispered in a chapel. They had found a family. But what happens when a promise made to God conflicts with a promise made to the human heart? Is a vow made in fear and desperation truly a vow at all, or is it a cage? We believe that true faith isn't always found within stone walls or ancient rituals, but in the profound, terrifying courage it takes to protect the ones we love, no matter the cost. It's found in the sacrifice that asks for nothing in return, and the love that endures even a decade of silence. What would you have done in her place? Would you have kept your sacred pledge? Or would you have broken it for the man you loved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of sacrifice, love, and redemption moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that touch the soul.